Hello, welcome everyone, wherever you are joining us for today's webinar. My name is Alexander Love, and I am a senior editor for Global Data. I'll be your host and moderator for this event. We're very pleased to have you attend today to discuss the topic, how to navigate the complexities of importer of record when running a clinical trial. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar platform. This webinar is browser-based, so if you disconnect at any point, then you can click the link you received via email to rejoin the session. If you'd like to ask any questions, you can do so using the Q&A widget on the platform. We'll try and get through as many questions as we can once the presentations have ended. Also, please use the help widget if you experience any technical difficulties or require any further assistance. And please use the related content box to access any additional resources. Today's webinar is brought to you by Oximio, a global clinical trials supply chain solutions provider. In this webinar, we will explain the crucial role of the importer of record in the clinical supply chain, helping products arrive at their intended destination on time and in the right conditions. However, the area is full of complexities as regulations can vary around the world. Any documentation errors can lead to severe delays of shipment and even result in fines. Ensuring smooth passage requires specialist knowledge and experience. In this webinar, we will hear more from Oximio about the best IOR practices and how to identify the main pain points, and we will also hear why complexities don't necessarily mean delays. I would now like to welcome our speakers. Firstly, we have Dr. Zayheda Khan, who is Chief Commercial Officer at Oximio, with more than 20 years of experience in a variety of roles across the clinical trial sectors. Secondly, we have Mark Woolf, who has more than 18 years of experience in clinical supply chain logistics, QA, and vendor management. At Oximio, Mark is responsible for business growth and strengthening the company's services worldwide. I look forward to hearing both presentations later on. Now, I'm just going to hand over to before I bring Zayheda on, just a quick reminder about the Q&A. So please send those using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will try and get through as many questions as we can during the course of this discussion. So now I'd like to hand over to Zayheda. Hi, Zayheda.
Thank you very much, Alex. Just briefly touching upon, I think, the agenda here for everyone, just to give you a brief overview of what we'll be discussing here today. First of all, welcome to our audience, no matter where you may be in the world, and also organisations. We look forward to myself and Mark giving you an overview of importer of records, like Alex had suggested, and some of the as we go through the agenda, some of the importance of having an importer of record and some of the do's and don'ts and challenges that we personally have encountered, and to give you some examples of those as well moving forward. So again, welcome. First of all, I'd like to give you a bit more of an overview, just a very short insight of Oximio. So Oximio is a clinical trial logistics provider with over 20 plus years of experience. Originally founded back in 2004 in Ukraine, originally known as SMO. So a lot of people here at the audience may have actually heard of, not have heard of Oximio, but have heard of SMO. And over the course of the years, we've gradually evolved and developed into various new locations across the world. At the end of 2020, well, at the end of 2023, having 8 owned depots across the world. All are audit process driven with global GXP depots across our network, not only consisting of our own depots, but also a stretch of network of partner depots also. And we cater for all major counterparts within a clinical trial environment. These include the CMOs, and most global sponsors included pharma and biotech organizations, as well as CROs who make up our clientele and our portfolio of services that we can offer to them. So as part of running a clinical trial, this can be quite a complex process, and it can particularly span over multiple countries, especially as they go through the increased phases, in particular phase 2, phase 3 and phase 4s. Among the many critical components that ensure a seamless execution of a clinical trial and service provided by clinical trial logistics providers and also CROs and many other organisations, one of these services which is very important to ensure the smooth running of the clinical trial is importer of records. And these can sometimes pass unnoticed. However, the IOR actually plays a very pivotal role in ensuring that the smooth running of a trial can meet its success. During the course of the next few slides of our presentation, we'd like to give you an insight of what an IOR actually entails and what we'd like to actually, the complexities of the IOR itself. Some metrics that we can see here, that as of July 2024, according to global data metrics, it was understood that actually 9.6% of trials were multinational. So we can understand the complexity required for an IOR service, an IOR provider to actually conduct these clinical trials. As part of a clinical trial supply solution, there are lots of pillars that need to be covered, and here we can just see 3 pillars as part of Oximio's service provision that we can actually provide to ensure a smooth delivery of a solution for a clinical trial. One pillar is the logistics solutions that actually covers more than what we will be discussing here. So that's the end-to-end logistics solution to make sure that there's a smooth transition of medicinal products from one location to another. But that also includes lots of other elements as well, the returns, also biosample management. Sourcing capabilities and patient solutions also are part of the end-to-end clinical trial solution. There's lots of elements here, but for this particular webinar, what we would like to focus on is the customs clearance, the importer of record, and what that entails. So, as an importer of record, what does this really mean? It really does mean that the entity or individual designated as the legal owner and importer of records, an importer of goods, entering the goods into that particular country. This responsibility entails ensuring compliance with all customs regulations, including duties, taxes, and permits. The IOR is typically the party that receives the goods at the destination port or border and is ultimately responsible and liable for any potential legal or financial consequences arising from any non-compliance as well. So, the importing and exporting of goods involves extensive paperwork, and we will go through that throughout the course of the next few slides in terms of what is required. But this is also complicated by involvement of various governmental agencies, and this complexity can pose challenges not only for shippers aiming to transport goods into specific countries, but also for clients as well, to ensure that they have a good knowledge of not only the regulations, but also the documentations that are required. So therefore, again, the IOR service does play a crucial role in facilitating these imports. So, experienced importer of records can ensure that the fulfillment of all customs responsibilities can reduce the likelihood of unnecessary inspections and streamlining the shipping process going from A to B. So, the importer of record is also recognised by various governments as we highlighted the entity responsible for owning or purchasing imported goods into a specific country. So therefore, the importer of record could act as the owner, as a purchaser of the goods, or as a service provider, such as customs broker or trading company that can offer IOR services. At the end, the conclusion of all of this is it is the IOR's responsibility to ensure that all goods are correctly documented and valued. Additionally, the importer of record is also accountable for paying any duties, tariffs, and fees that are associated with the imported goods. And some challenges that can come with that will also be addressed in the forthcoming slides. I'd like to hand over to Mark now, who will go into a little bit more details in terms of the requirements for an IOR.
Thank you, Zayheda. The requirements for are laid out here. You will require a legal entity. So the IOR must be a legally registered entity within the country where the trial is taking place. This is essential to facilitate compliance with local laws and regulations. The expertise of an IOR cannot be underestimated. They need to possess the relevant knowledge and expertise of regulatory matters and customs procedures in order to navigate the clinical trial logistics effectively. The local representation of your import of record is also key in order to ensure that that local presence is suitable, has a suitable network of contacts to meet the needs of the trial. These would include relationships with local customs authorities, government agencies, and logistics providers. Oximio can support IOR for your clinical trial. We are adept at navigating global logistics, which can be a real headache, especially when it comes to importing goods. That's where the import of record service can be a lifesaver. If you're thinking about using an IOR to handle your imports, you might be wondering what they do. So let's have a little bit of a look and break down what this is. Acting as an importer for customs purposes during importation is one of the tasks. Supporting registrations in other countries, applying for necessary import licenses and permits. They also maintain records for the minimum duration required by law as needed by the customers. Preparing certificates of origin where required. All of this goes towards avoiding costly trade compliance penalties. Other responsibilities of the IOR in shipping is to ensure compliance of import regulations for the destination country, paying all applicable taxes and duties and fees for the imported goods. They also file necessary documentation, permits, licenses for those goods. And finally, the documentation needs to be compliant to all the checks, all the import permits, and the licensing that will be coming together as part of your documentation. Shipping status and tracking reports, they will do this for you. They will let you know where your goods are in the process. And the relevant customs channels, when it's been cleared for shipping, they'll let you know that that has actually taken place. They will pay customs clearance charges on your behalf, and then you will reimburse them at a later date. They do perform and can perform, and Oximio does perform, door-to-door delivery for the end user. We also provide warehousing and storage solutions around your imported goods. And to sum up, the import of record is your go-to person for making sure your international shipments go smoothly. They handle all the paperwork, regulations, and all that custom documentation so you don't have to. Imagine that as your personal customs agent, making sure everything's in order, avoiding those nasty penalties. IORs take care of things like getting the right permits, ensuring that those taxes and duties are paid, and keeping track of all the paperwork. Plus, they know all the ins and outs of import rules, so you can relax knowing that your shipment is in good hands. In addition, the IOR will look after some other parts of your shipping for you. It's their responsibility as the importer of record to declare the exact value of the shipment. This value is typically determined based on the prices listed on the commercial invoice, which includes product costs, licensing fees, and post-importation transportation expenses. As an important note, acting as the importer of record, if you intend to act as a declarant or the importer of record yourself, it is crucial to understand that undervaluing the shipment is not only unethical, but also carries significant risks. Customs authorities may impose penalties, and additional costs for examination and storage could subsequently increase the overall shipment expenses. I'll now hand back to Zayheda for HS codes.
Thank you, Mark. So, as we've heard here, the primary responsibilities of any importer of record, but also part of this is ensuring all the documentation is accurate. And part of fulfilling the documentation also includes the HS code. The HS code, also known as the harmonized system code. It's essentially a way of classifying imported goods, and the goods are typically classified underneath using this international harmonized system, a 6-digit standard, which classifies and determines the type of products that are actually that is actually the category is actually assigned to. These codes are further extended based on the regulations of the importing country. So one HS code that might be in one particular country may not necessarily be the same in another location. So it's essential that these HS codes are differentiated and actually accounted for and allocated correctly. So HS code is essentially a social security number for the goods. And also, in addition to that, it will actually determine the applicable duties, rates, and that actually comply with the import regulations to make sure that they are actually assigned correctly and the right tariffs that actually can be paid upfront. So in essence, ensuring that the HS code is assigned correctly is key to the importer of records and the importer of record activities. Any incorrect HS codes which are assigned can not only have weeks but also months of delayed. So as an importer of record or your importer of record provider, it's essential that they have knowledge of this and are able to support all your any client activities in assigning, making sure that the HS code is actually being appropriately assigned for the goods that are going to be imported into that particular country. I'll hand you over now to Mark to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the do's and don'ts.
Thank you, Zayheda. So there are a few do's and there are a few don'ts when it comes to importation. The role of the investigational medical product, or IMP, responsible person, as in IR, can sometimes create a clash between different priorities. For example, the stricter rules for classifying placebos can clash with the need to keep the studies blind. This is because customs officials often require unblinded shipping invoices to determine the correct duties. Whilst this helps them to do the job, it can compromise the integrity of the study. To balance these competing interests, it is best to send the shipping invoice electronically to a customs broker separately from the shipment itself. This helps prevent information about the contents from reaching the clinical sites. IOR responsibilities vary differently from country to country. Sometimes sponsors or the contractor research organizations, CROs, must take on this role. In other places, a third-party company like Oximio can act as the IOR. If a sponsor decides to handle the IOR role themselves, they often need to set up a local office or work with somebody on the ground. If this isn't possible, they have to have the right business licenses there in order to operate. They'll need to hire a third party and give them legal authority to act on their behalf. Some of the don'ts. If you declare a nominal value of your shipping invoice, customs officials might put your shipment on hold to reevaluate it based on their own records of similar products. This often leads to a higher value, which means you'll pay more in duties and taxes. This can hurt your study budget and timeline. Customs authorities expect sponsors to have clear, well-documented valuation methods. They may ask you for proof of this, and they're doing this more and more often. If you can't provide this evidence, your shipment could be held up in customs while they investigate, and this can be especially problematic when it comes to temperature-sensitive products. To avoid these issues, make sure you have a solid process in place for determining the value of your shipments. The tariff clarification, or the harmonized tariff code, directly affects the amount of duty you pay. The classification depends on the type of product, whether it is an active IMP or placebo. If you classify your shipment incorrectly, it can lead to delays in the customs and incorrect payments. It's crucial to understand the differences and apply the correct classification to your shipments. The country of origin is determined by where the product was manufactured. If it was modified or processed in another country, various factors will determine the official certificate of origin, including where the product underwent substantial transformation. The certificate of origin is important for country statistics. If you don't manage your certificate of process and paperwork correctly, you could face delays that can damage the temperature-sensitive shipments, increase costs, and negatively impact your patients. Repeated mistakes can also lead to increased scrutiny, audits, fines, or even seized shipments by customs. We're going to do a little case study for you here. Oximio identified challenges in dry shipping from clinical site to labs, which included exportation challenges. Oximio has introduced a dry ice system which can last for 19 to 20 days with multiple openings of the container from site to site or at site. It's fully traceable through GPS tracking and with the ability to monitor in real time the location of the vessel, when the vessel is open, and for how long that vessel was open. Oximio has assisted with importation and subsequent exportation of these containers. This means we can move biosamples securely within the country, then export them to a lab destination. Temperature is maintained within the ranges required, and the costs have been significantly reduced. For continents such as Africa, where dry ice is in very short supply, this system has become a game changer for clinical sites. Zayheda, I hand back over to you.
Thank you, Mark. So, as an overview of IOR services and what we've heard in a very short period of time, is to actually understand that IOR is actually it's very specialised service, and this customs brokerage service it's important to have that in-depth regulatory review and planning to ensure that you have that connection and you actually understand what the regulations and documentation are required. Here at Oximio, we like to fulfill that this is an end-to-end solution for clinical trial logistics, and we're not only able to provide the regulatory and the project management support of such services, but we can also centralise and make sure that your document management is also in line with what is required. It's also important to have proactive adjustments, actually understanding and adapting to changes in important export regulations, because these regulations do change, can change quite often, and having that expertise that can fulfill the needs of what is required should be more of a streamlined fashion, and we hope that we are able to support those efforts for you. So all in all, it's important to have an IOR package of services that we can fulfill not only from a comprehensive need of what customs services are required from a regulatory, a documentation and a knowledge perspective, but also management of your shipments and from country to country, and making sure that there's a streamlined process throughout. It's important to also have a handle of the reimbursement of customs duties and VAT where applicable. Each country and each authority has different reimbursement strategies, and it's important to understand what those taxes and what those rebates you will be accustomed to, or you'll be and to actually make sure that you have that alignment from not only country to country for these international clinical trials. So, as we have just heard over the course of the last few slides throughout this webinar, is that navigating global clinical logistics can be a real headache for some, especially when it comes to importing of goods. And that's where the importance of having an importer of record service can be a lifesaver. So if you're a sponsor, a CRO, or any other part of the health industry, and you're wanting to know a little bit more or thinking of using an IOR to handle your imports, it might be actually having a deep dive and actually a clear understanding of what they actually do and how they can support you. So some of the key benefits that we've outlined here of having the importer of record service is obviously compliance, to ensure that your IOR service not only complies with the documentation, but also all the necessary tax laws and guidance that you require. This obviously helps reduce not only the risk of fines and penalties, but provides you the peace of mind for the importer, and then you can focus on your core business operation while the IOR handles the rest of the import process. The risk mitigation, especially when it comes to legal responsibilities, lies on the importer or the importer of record. So therefore, reducing your exposure to potential risks, such as fines and penalties, and to make sure that that team of professionals who has an in-depth understanding of the local regulations can actually take over all the necessary activities for you. And then again, also to give you peace of mind. A streamlined process by outsourcing most of the importer of record process to a professional IOR service. Importers can focus on their core business operations, while the rest of the activities, such as handling the customs clearance and delivering the goods to the end destination of where it's required, can actually be taken away from your pressures. Can be cost savings. It helps reduce costs by negotiating better deals with shipping companies. And we've at Oximio have been able to manage and do that, not only with import related activities, but also with the transportation of products going from customs to the end destination. There are a lot of other benefits that are also highlighted here on this slide, and I won't go through each of these points. But in conclusion, the importer of records does provide a range of benefits for businesses importing goods into a foreign country, and this can almost always be a bit of a minefield, especially when regulations can always be a never-changing landscape. Therefore, reducing risk and cost, providing expertise and streamlining the import process. The IOR service, again, is an invaluable tool for businesses who are looking to expand their operations into new markets, and where a service provider such as Oximio can provide the guidance and the requirements for what is required in those new locations and countries. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope the webinar has been insightful and useful for you. But Alex, over to you.
Thank you, Zayheda and Mark, for your excellent presentations. And just a reminder for the audience to ask any questions, please do so sending them via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We've had a couple of questions come in while Zayheda and Mark were talking. Mark, perhaps you could answer this first question. You mentioned temperature control. How does Oximio manage biosamples and temperature management?
Thank you, Alex. Oximio has quite a bit of a history of working in Africa for some time. We visited a lot of the clinical sites. Having visited those sites, we asked them what challenges they were having, and we found that of the 54 countries in Africa, only 4 can produce dry ice. And the solutions in the past have been to send a dry ice shipper followed by another dry ice shipper to top up during the journey. We came across a solution where we can send a vessel, a dry ice vessel, to a clinical site. It will last up to 21 days. They can then send it from site to site. We will help them to do the shipping. We will pick it up from site A, pass it through to B, C, and D, etc. They can do 10 or 15 sites. They can then add their samples to this one vessel, and then we will then pick it up from their last site and transport it to the lab for them. This has made it much more cost effective. It has also managed the biosample temperature management, making it virtually indestructible. We have a very, very high success rate of getting all samples from clinical sites back to labs, no matter what the distance. This includes shipping an empty vessel, when I say empty, but with dry ice, into the country in the first place, so we have to import it in. We then have to export it to the lab, and that lab may not be in Africa, it may be in Belgium, it could be in Asia, and it could be in the US, all of which we have experience doing. Thank you.
Great, thanks for such a detailed answer, Mark. So we have another question that's come through. Perhaps, Zayheda, you could take this one. How do bonded warehouses work for import?
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for the question. And I think bonded warehouses, bonded depots, customs bonded depots is also a very, it's a lot of questions that get asked to us about what that actually entails. So as a point, a customs bonded facility is a secure warehouse that can store medicinal products and goods under customs regulations. So the bonded warehouse can store, for example, an IMP, an investigational medicinal product, securely under temperature-controlled conditions, but it's not treated outside of the customs territory. So it's an extension of the customs arm, which means that actually when it does enter the customs bonded depots, the duties and the taxes are actually deferred until they're released from that bonded facility. This can also have like lots of other benefits for clinical trial sponsors, because you don't necessarily have to pay for the duties and the taxes while the IMP is actually kept under bond. It's only once it's actually released onto the clinical trial. So you can actually, the cash flow, for example, can be, you can have, like, say, a better cash flow, because you can actually manage what is required for the taxes. Don't have to pay all in one go. You can actually streamline that through the course of a clinical trial. The important factor here is also, not only could be a better streamlined process for, I suppose, the import and export of goods, but it's also can reduce the risk of any delays coming into that particular country as well. So, bulk shipments can be brought into customs and then shipped out in smaller outbounds or exports going into the end destination. But the integrity, like I mentioned, the integrity of your goods remain consistent and on the highest quality basis, because it's kept under temperature control conditions and under very secure facilities as well. So I hope that answers the question, but it can also be a bit of a minefield, but we're also happy to answer questions. They can contact us directly as well about bonded facilities and bonded warehouses.
Great, thanks for another very detailed answer. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to our panelists, Zayheda and Mark, for their excellent presentations. To all the attendees, thank you for joining us. Tomorrow you will receive an email to say how you can access the on-demand version of this webinar, or you can access it through the website Arena International /events. Please continue to ask any questions and interact with the widgets, as the on-demand version of this event will remain interactive. The speakers, if we didn't have time for your question today, we'll be able to provide you with a written response directly, and we will get back to you on that. And please stay tuned for more Oximio content as part of Global Data and Oximio's partnership. And thank you once again, and I hope to see you again soon.